Good morning, everybody, and thank you for giving me the opportunity of presenting this talk. So I'm going to present you what we have done this last year using almost 11 years of sea surface salinity monitored from space. I have prepared these presentations with my colleagues from the Climate Change Initiative Sea Surface Salinity Consortium and also with some inputs from the SMOS CATDS team. So this animation shows you the soil moisture over the land and the sea surface salinity over the ocean as measured from SMOS since 2010. You can see a lot of freshwater inputs from the river plumes, for instance here from the Amazon plumes, also from the precipitations over the ITCZ, over the tropical Pacific Ocean. Here in the Bay of Bengal, you can see a lot of fresh water coming from the Ganga Brahmaputra, which is transported by the eddies outside of the Bay of Bengal. Here again, the Niger and Congo plumes, and you can see how the fresh water is transported by the mesoscale and by the eddies. For instance, here also in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, sometimes you can see some fresh water that escapes from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, for instance. So in this presentation, I am going to illustrate how these data have been used to study the water cycle. So why does the sea surface salinity matter for the water cycle? One needs to remind that more than three-fourths of the evaporation and precipitation occur over the ocean. So the ocean is a major component of the water cycle, and the salinity is a footprint of the freshwater input. It is a footprint of the runoff, of the precipitation, of the ice melting, also at high latitude. But it is also active. The salinity is an actor of the ocean circulation because it sets the density of the seawater. And in particular, it sets the vertical density stratification. And at high latitudes, in cold water, the density is primarily driven by the salinity. So to well understand the thermohaline circulation, one really needs to well know the salinity. But even over the global ocean, in case there are large inputs of fresh waters, in case of runoff, of precipitation, the variation of the salinity very often brings large variations of density, and this creates modifications of the stratification in the surface layer, and this can modify the depth of the mixed layer, the depth of the layer that can exchange rapidly with the atmosphere. This has consequences, of course, for the exchange of water, but also the exchange of heat, the exchange of carbon, and the exchange of a biogeochemical tracer. So in this presentation, I am going to show results that have been obtained by combining the salinity measured by SMOS, by Aquarius, and by SMAP. SMOS has the resolution on the order of 43 kilometers, and it was launched at the end of 2009. And we combined it with Aquarius, which was launched in June 2011, and which has a resolution of 150 kilometers, so much coarser than the SMOS resolution. And we also used the SMAP radiometer, which has a spatial resolution close to the one of SMOS, and which was launched at the beginning of 2015. So the goal of the Climate Change Initiative project was to take the full advantage of SMOS, Aquarius, and SMAP missions and to create a 10-year-long climate data record of high-quality sea surface salinity together with the associated uncertainties. Following the user requirements, we retain the high variability sampled by the satellites and we derive products which have a spatio-temporal resolution of 50 per 50 kilometers square and 1 week. Here I illustrate the variability that is sampled by these CCI satellite salinity and by in situ measurements. On the left of this slide, you can see the salinity, the standard deviation of the salinity as derived by CCI products on the top and as derived by Argo in situ floats at the bottom. You can see that in the tropics and subtropics, this variability is very similar. And over the global ocean, the RMS difference between the satellite measurements and the Argo salinity is 0.16, which is the best performance we achieve today with satellite measurements. You can see also on the correlation maps that in the tropics and subtropics, the correlation between satellite and in situ measurements is really good. It is on the order of 0.8 to 1. But at high latitude, you can see that the correlation is poor. There are two reasons for that. The first reason is that there are less variability, so the correlation is less variability in the salinity. But you can see also on the maps of the standard deviation of the salinity that even so, the patterns of variability are very similar between Argo and CCI. For instance, in the Southern Ocean, you can see that the Agulhas return currents, you can see it, but it is less, the amplitude is smaller on the CCI maps than on the Argo maps. And there can be several reasons for that, but we think that one cause for this is that the mesoscale variability is at a finer scale than 50 kilometers when going at high latitudes, and probably the satellite measurements today do not resolve all the variability. We are sure about that, and this could be a reason why we don't observe such a large variability. So now I'm going to do a world tour to show you the kind of variability that is observed by satellite, and I will start with the tropical Pacific Ocean. These maps on the right hand side here show you mean salinity anomalies observed during the El Nino events that occurred during 2010 to 2019, and on the bottom it's the same, but during La Nina events. So you can see a very contrasted situation with during El Nino events, the fresh water in the western tropical Pacific that is pushed toward the central Pacific Ocean, whereas it's the contrary during La Nina events. You can see also large anomalies in the north, in the ITCZ and even north of it, because the fresh water was transported north of it. And also in the SPCZ, in the southern Pacific Ocean, you can see a change in the SPCZ associated with these events. Of course, each El Nino and each La Nina events is different, and we can also document a lot these differences. And on the left, it's an Hofmüller of the equatorial salinity, which shows you that there are some differences between these events. I don't have time to comment about that, but I would like to comment also a bit about the anomalies we see over the Indian Ocean. And in fact, this is not related to El Niño, La Niña events, but these anomalies are related to Indian Ocean dipoles that sometimes were faced more or less with the ENSO events. So now I continue the tour towards the tropical Atlantic Ocean, and I am looking here at a study which study the tropical instability waves in the Atlantic Ocean. And in fact, this study looked at the origin of the energy that fuel these tropical instability waves. And these authors shows that the potential energy that is generated by the horizontal density gradients in the upper 60 meters of the ocean is equally due to salinity and temperature gradients. And you can see on the right here that these tropical instability waves have signature in salinity, in temperature and sea level anomalies that vary from 1 year to the other, and you can see how salinity and temperature are very complementary to document the density. So now I am still in the tropical Atlantic Ocean, but this time on the western part of the Atlantic Ocean. I am showing you here a study that was performed during the Eureke 4A campaign, which occurred at the beginning of 2020, and which was where there were several ships, and there was a French ship that was guided by satellite images, and in particular by the real-time satellite salinity images which were produced by the CATDS. And this allowed the ship to go to a fresh plume that occurred at the end of January, and this fresh plume is not always observed at that period of the year, but this year it occurred. And on the left of this slide, you can see the temporal evolution of the fresh plume from the beginning of February to mid-February. And you can see how the fresh plumes evolves, and 2 weeks after the beginning of the story, there was a fresh water that was exported towards the open ocean. And combining this information with the ship measurements, it was possible to quantify the export of fresh water. And this has also consequences about the export of biogeochemical properties, and in particular the export of low CO2 partial pressures. This, as I said, this event is not always observed at this period of the years, and using CCI data, it was possible to show that it was observed in 7 out of 10 years. So now I go to the North Atlantic, to the high latitudes. This is very challenging because the water is very cold, so it's much more difficult to retrieve an accurate salinity in these regions, but nevertheless, it's possible. And Simon José and colleagues looked at an anomaly that occurred in 2018, which is here shown on the in situ measurements on the right panels from July to November 2018. And on the middle panels, you can see the evolution of these anomalies, but as detected by the CCI salinity. And you can see that we detect well the fresh anomalies, and it seems to come from the southwest of the region, and it seems to be transported toward the east, and it decreases, the amplitude decreases as in November, as observed also by in situ measurements. So it's works in progress, but it is very promising for the future. So now I am talking about the next challenges, and I will start with the data analysis challenges. I've shown you 10 years of satellite sea surface salinity, which provides an unprecedented spatio-temporal coverage, and it has been proven to be very useful for scientific studies. But this data points towards new questions, new issues. The first one is how to close the salinity budgets in regions of very high variability of sea surface salinities. Because in fact, the fresh regions, which are the ones that are very poorly documented using in situ measurements because they are very variable, these regions are also characterized by a lot of variability at a scale which is smaller than the satellite pixel. So it's very important to be able to characterize the subpixel salinity variability, to be able to close the salinity uncertainty budget. We know that, of course, to reduce salinity uncertainties, it remains some uncertainties related to the long-term calibration of the satellite measurements, to the long-term stability of the external parameters used in the salinity retrieval, and we also need to improve the filterings of ICE, of RFI, and our radiative transfer model. Concerning the cold waters and the polar oceans, it's crucial to get a very good, excellent, I should say, calibration, filterings, external data, because even a small default, because of the low sensitivity of the radiometric signal to SSS, a small default translates into a big default in salinity. But nevertheless, several teams obtained recently a very encouraging results. Here I am showing a study we performed at CATDS. We took the ESA level 2 OS salinity, and we filtered them in a specific way, and we also correct from inaccuracies in the sea surface temperature, and we end up with a time series of salinity which show very well the variability in the river plumes, and also the variability in the Beaufort Gyre and in the region of where the Pacific waters enter in the Arctic Ocean, and a lot of variability in the Chukchi and the East Siberian Sea. Needs to be pursued. Now I'm going to my last slide about the next missions. What about the future missions? I already said, and the previous talks also said, that SMOS is very old, SMAP is old, so we need continuity. Currently, there are two missions that are supported by the agencies. There is the Copernicus CIMER mission. There are also the SMOS follow-up projects with the SMOS Next and a SMOS HR. And these missions should be really supported, and it's urgent really to support them, because SMOS and SMAP won't continue forever. We need high spatial resolution. I showed you in my presentation that for looking at the high latitude, for looking at the variability of the salinity in the fresh river plumes, to better understand what happens, we really need a higher spatial resolution. And the only techniques that is able today to provide a resolution on the order of 12 to 4 kilometers is the interferometry. So I personally think that it's really important to support the SMOS follow-up projects. We need to enhance also, of course, the quality of the retrieved salinities. And we better know today how to reduce the uncertainty. We know that we need to refine, that it's very important to refine the calibration, the RFI filterings, and I am sure CIMR and the SMOS follow-up projects will better take care of the issues we had with previous missions. There is also a way of enhancement using multi-parameters retrieved on the same platform, and CIMR will help with respect to that, since it will retrieve salinity, sea surface temperature, and wind speed on the same platform, so this should help also. So I have finished. I thank you all for your attention.